Today is Friday, March 5th, 2021, and as is typical, we make our videos on Fridays. Most of the time, we make our videos on Fridays for the whole week. And so today we were going to speak on a subject of Senate Bill 122, which is what?
50-50 shared custody.
Yeah, making it easier to get shared custody, especially 50-50 shared custody. And what's interesting about that is that today that bill
Passed the House.
Passed the House. It's going to be law unless the governor vetoes it, and the chances of that happening are slim to none. So we were going to talk about it one way or the other. But we've been noticing there it could have come to the floor for a vote today, and by the time we got around to finishing all the other videos and got to this one, we checked just minutes ago, it passed. So we're going to talk about it. Either way, we were going to say the same things. The only thing that would have been different is, so if this passes, hooray.
Right.
If this does not pass, boo. Right. Now, this is the fourth substitute, meaning that there were 4 different drafts before this got to the House floor. So the original draft of the bill is quite different from what the fourth substitute that was passed is. And what would you say? Has there been, some give and some take, some good things that got cut out and some bad things that got corrected?
Yeah, I think the fourth version isn't horrible. It's still a step in the right direction. I'm not as versed with the first 3 other versions, but this one we've gone over lunch.
Okay.
So I can speak about this one.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And again, it doesn't really matter what the other versions were because those are the ones that got passed.
Right.
All right. So I will say this first of all. It's, as we talked about, this is a good thing for a certain kind of parent who was being mistreated by the law up to this point, and that is fathers. There is a bias, or I should say, well, there still is, but there was a legislative bias. There were statutes. They were codifying the bias against fathers. And so this is a step in the right direction by making it harder to be biased and prejudiced against fathers. Now, the legislators and even the courts will go out of their way to say, oh, no, there was never any kind of bias. That's just a lie. It's just an outright lie.
The default parent time was the standard minimum.
Yeah.
So it was the least amount of time you could get.
There was a statutory minimum that said right in it, this is the minimum a parent can get, unless, of course, you were shown to be unfit.
Right.
So you had perfectly fit parents getting minimum that suddenly became known as, what did you call it?
Standard minimum.
The standard. No, and then it just changed to standard.
Yeah.
So what was going on is that these good parents, mostly fathers, but some women, were getting minimum, which then morphed into this. It wasn't ever written down in the code, but it came as like, well, the statute, that this is the statutory standard.
Standard
This
minimal.
is standard. This is what most people get. It's the standard. And it was the minimal. It said right in the code, this is the minimum. And when you'd bring that up in court saying, well, wait, why should this parent get minimum time? What has this person done or failed to do to get minimum time? It just morphed into this thing. So there were efforts to fix that. It took years. And then after just a few years ago, they came up with what they called the alternate. It was just weird. They called it the alternate schedule, as if to say minimum is the standard, but I guess if minimum's not good enough if minimum's not good enough for you, if it's not good enough for you and your kids, I guess we can come up with something else. We can give you an alternate. And that was 145. So I should say this, 30-3-35, the minimum standard was about 90 overnights a year. Then 35.1, the alternate schedule, came around, which ended up giving the non-custodial parent, which of course is not really a non-custodial parent, because to be a non-custodial parent, you have to have 110 or less overnights per year. So this would give you 145, but there were still courts and lawyers and even parents that were like, do I really have to call him a joint physical custodian? Well, yeah, if you want to be correct. And that was 145 overnights. Okay? Well, that's a heck of a lot better than around 90, but we all know there are 365 days in a year, and half of 365 is 182.5. So why don't we have some provision in the code for a joint equal custody schedule? Well, we'll tell you. Why didn't we ever have one? And even now, we don't have a presumption, but it's a heck of a lot better. Why didn't we have we can do 50-50 if X, Y, and Z exist? Why not?
That's hard for me to answer other than...
Well, it's easy for me to answer,
Yeah.
and that is because they just didn't like the idea of 50-50 custody for fathers.
Yep.
There is this presumption that is going away. It's funny. In the courts and among attorneys, there was this idea that 50-50 custody was just unheard of and just unspeakable, inconceivable was the idea. It's like, because kids,
it should be flipped on its head. It should be
exactly.
It should be these parents that are good people. One of them should have less just because. No, it should be exactly the opposite. Which this is going to.
And if the parents are married, when the kids were born, each parent was automatically a 50-50 equal legal custodian and physical custodian, just by virtue of being married. Now, even if you weren't married, the idea that the child was born, suddenly one of you became fit and unfit, custodial, non-custodial, that's nonsense too.
Right, and before anybody gets upset, we're not saying one parent is a stay-at-home parent, and the other parent flies jet planes all over the world, and that 50-50 can somehow work. Not really if the kid's like an
That's a good point. We should talk about that.
Yeah.
So we're not saying that everybody should have 50-50 custody. We're saying that if you're a fit parent,
if it can happen,
and it can happen, it should be given, and you shouldn't have to fight for what you already had.
Right.
But that's exactly what you had to do. If you were
and your kids don't deserve that.
Essentially, if you were a father, or if you were a mother who had a job and had a stay-at-home husband, the odds were against you. Actually, if you were a mom who had a job and you had a stay-at-home husband, you still had a better chance than the father in many cases. Now, are we fathers' rights attorneys? No. Those guys are bitter and angry people for the most part, and so we're not those guys. But it's just obvious. You'd be lying. Strap up anybody in the legal system who said, yeah, there's a bias against fathers, and if they said, no, there's no bias, they'd fail the polygraph. Now, that
just
doesn't
because
mean
I'm a father doesn't mean I'm a father's rights advocate. I'm a parental rights advocate because parents deserve their kids deserve their parents.
And so this is what was going on, is that there's this cultural belief, and it's still there, although it's weakening, thank goodness, that moms are better fathers. I mean, moms are better parents than fathers.
Right.
That may be true in certain cases. But even if you're not a stay-at-home dad, even if you're not there taking care of children during their waking hours, the fact that you weren't recognized as a father for going to work and having a stay-at-home mom. Nothing against stay-at-home moms. My mom was a stay-at-home mom.
Right.
Your mom was a stay-at-home mom.
Kind of.
Yeah.
For a little bit. And then later she worked. Yeah.
My wife was a stay-at-home mom until our kids were in school. And then she said, well, I don't need to be at home now. So, I mean, I love the fact that my mom was a stay-at-home mom. I'm a better man for that. Yeah. So we're not against that. What we're saying is you can still exercise 50-50 custody, and mom can still stay at home 50% of the time with the kids, and dad can have the kids 50% of the time and still have a job. They may both have to change their schedules. Moms and dads' lives may change, but if they're doing it for the sake of the kids, why won't we allow them to do that for the sake of the kids?
Right.
SB 122 has taken steps in the right direction. You're going to hear that several times. I hope we don't repeat ourselves too much.
And one of the things that was troubling before is that even if mom and dad lived very close to each other and dad had this really flexible job,
a work-from-home job, especially in the age of COVID-19.
The court would often say, well, because dad works, in other words, he's taking care of the family, being a good dad, we commend him for that, but he just can't have as much time with the kids, even if it is possible.
Yeah, and even if he works like 12-hour days so that he can be home with the kids half the time and never have to be distracted by work, no, because we don't believe you'll do it. We don't believe you're sincere.
Even if the kids are at school when he's working, then they're home when he's off.
We got to mention this idea. There was also this weird belief that if a dad wanted 50-50 custody, which was meaning, hey, I want to be as much as a parent as you are, as much a parent as you are. I don't want the kids to love my wife, ex-wife, their mother any less. Right. I just don't want to be marginalized as a parent either. I want to be as involved as I can, love my kids, and rear them as best I can.
I don't want to be the visitor.
Yeah. People had a hard time believing that those kind of fathers were sincere, and they would say, oh, you're just doing it so that you'll have lower child support. Which is funny, because that would then imply that women who wanted sole custody just wanted it for the extra money. Look, there are people that would try to abuse 50-50 custody to save money and then never have anything to do with the kids.
Sure.
But that's equally true that there are people that say, I need to have sole custody because mom or dad is unfit just to get money.
Just to get the money and then not take care of the kids.
Yeah, so this idea that this is about money, it could be, but let's face it. For most people that were trying to get as much time with their kids as they could without taking time away from the other parent, it's because they love their kids and want to be there for them. And how many people do you know whose parents divorced that are our age or around that? I'm 52, you're
47.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. How many people do you know whose parents divorced? Mom got the kids. It wasn't even discussed if it should be. It was unthinkable. And these kids are like, I am so angry that I didn't get to spend much time with my dad. I wanted more time with my dad. I begged my mom. I begged my dad. Dad would say, I'd love it if you spent more time with me. I'm not allowed. And mom would act like, well, it can't happen because the court has ordered this, as if mom and dad couldn't have come to an agreement. But hey, mom didn't want to do it. Dad was out of luck, and so were the kids.
And you can use words like best interest of the child, but if you're not really thinking about the best interest of the child, it's just it's a cool phrase to say.
And it used to be
justify.
It used to be believed that it was presumptively in the best interest of the child to be in the sole custody of a parent, which really meant the sole custody of mom. The rest of the country, let's talk about that. The rest of the country is moving away from that. Other states have passed laws that make it harder. Arizona's done that. Kentucky's done that recently. There are many states. Utah has now joined that club, but not exactly. Okay, so we'll start with telling you about what happened with SB 122. The fourth substitute is the one that passed the House today, Friday, March 5th, 2021. Number one, as we said, step in the right direction, really badly drafted bill. Just in the language used. Yeah, kind of sloppy, kind of makes certain presumptions and assumptions that really don't apply to everybody. A couple of things that really still are there to kind of be a subtle dig at dads and a benefit to moms without using actual
those
male,
terms.
female, mother, father terms. So we'll talk about that. All right, so here's what SB 122 is doing. It's going to amend Section 30-3-34 of the Code. It's going to amend 78B-12-208 of the Code. That's to do with the calculation of child support. And it enacts a new section of Code, 30-3-35.2. And that's probably the one you'll be most interested to hear about. All right. So here's the changes SB 122 has made. All right. So it used to be that, as Brian talked about, that it was presumed that, the statute said there was a minimum amount of time a fit parent would get, and that would
which ended up being the standard.
Yeah, which was about 90 overnights a year, which then became minimal, then became standard, simply because of bias and prejudice against fathers generally.
Which was horrible to hear, standard minimal. That's like if you were going to go buy a car, you give them your lowest ball offer, and then they say, well, it's worth way more than this, and then you say, that's the standard.
That's the standard. That's the standard minimum.
My standard minimum offer.
Yeah, it's like, well, this isn't fair. It's like, well, are you saying a standard isn't fair? And that's what they would do. They'd say, wait a minute, what are you crabbing about? You're saying minimal? The standard isn't good enough for you? What makes you so special? It's like, nothing makes me that special. It's just that I'm not bad enough to deserve minimum.
Right, I don't deserve minimum.
So we had to get that thinking out of the way, and that's what 35.1 did, 145 overnights. Mm-hmm. Well, then that started to become the, hey.
And that was called, I think they referred to it as the extra weekends or
fat weekends.
Fat weekends.
And so what's happening then is that became the standard. It's like, okay, look, 145 is better than 90, but there's no reason I should settle for 145. I want equal. And they're like, what are you complaining about? Oh, what makes you so special? It's like, I'm not going to take less than equal when there's no reason for me not to have
if I'm a horrible, dangerous person, if all those things that are outlined.
Sure. But I'm not. Sure, right. My kids will benefit from equal. I'll benefit from equal. I want to be as happy and involved a parent as I possibly can, and I'm not happy with 145. It was weird. So we've never liked the idea that 145 solved all the problems. Right. But then that's literally what opponents of 50-50 were saying. Well, why are you complaining? Look, you've got 145, and when I went to testify on the committee about this, it's like, well, that's like saying it went from grossly unfair to dads to just less grossly unfair.
Yeah. Mostly unfair.
Just less grossly unfair. Yeah. Okay, so what they had to do is they had to say, look, we've got to get this out of the court's heads and the lawyers and these anti-50-50 parents.
Right.
Like, look, if 50-50 can work, if 50-50 will work as well as or better than a non-custodial situation, then you need to award 50-50 custody because it's not going to hurt kids at worst.
Right.
And it's almost certainly going to be better for the kids.
Right.
You've got
just because you have it doesn't mean you have to exercise it. Let's say, he's a woman, I'm a man, we get married, or whatever part of the conjugation you want to put there.
And I'm okay with 50-50.
Sure.
But
turns out I try to do 50-50, but I'm just too busy. I can't make it work. And then I have to say, hey, I want this time, but it's just not working. Can we dial it back a little?
So he keeps foisting time onto me, and I said, I was willing to do 50-50. but you can see it doesn't work, and I'm tired
Right,
of...
and it's not because I don't want it.
Yeah.
It's just it doesn't
Despite
work
your
for
best
whatever.
efforts,
Right.
it's just not working. You really can't change.
For my job, whatever.
Yeah,
Sure.
you'll either have a good job or no job.
Right.
So we could have said, look, 50-50 just won't work.
Yeah.
And I could say, look, this does not mean you're an unfit parent. We'll even
Right.
put that in our settlement agreement. We'll even put
Sure.
that in our decree. This is uneven because
Sure,
at this
or
time...
we take the 50-50 and then you and I just agree to change up the
Yeah,
weekend.
and that when you have to be out of town or something...
Because it's easier to
you'll-
say, I
yeah.
need less of what I actually
Right, and
have
when
than
you're
to
out-
try to beg for more
And
of
when
what
you're
you
out
don't
of town,
have.
you'll just give me a certain little bit of extra cash
Sure.
to cover that for the extra food and the extra time I have to spend or the inconvenience or whatever.
Sure.
Okay. So here's what 3334 has been amended to say. So rather than it being that the minimum can be 3335, 90 overnights, around that, or 35.1, 145 overnights. Now there's a possibility of 35.2, which is equal, but only one of you can have 183 overnights, and the other has to have 182. And the way they presume it should, who gets 183, has got to be one of the stupidest things I've ever seen. But
Yeah.
am I
It's
okay?
still progress.
It's still
Yeah.
progress because it finally makes it easier for people to get 50-50 custody without having to fight cultural biases
Yeah.
and judges who just will not consider the possibility, and parents who will say, well, I don't have to go along with 50-50 because it won't be
Because,
awarded.
yeah.
All I have to do is say I'm against it and it won't happen. That's now harder for opponents of 50-50 custody. Okay, this is weird. I don't know why this is, but a court may consider certain factors. I don't know why it's not shall.
You'd think that
because-
wouldn't be that big of a difference, but it is in
Because now a court could
terms
say,
of-
I could have considered all these good things.
May means might.
We'll read the list. Well, may means optional.
Yeah.
And it should be shall, but I can't imagine a court that wouldn't review these. It's like, well, I may, I don't have to. It's like, Your Honor, you're going to look pretty stupid if you don't justify why you made your decision without addressing these. So this is one of those weird mays that's probably going to be treated as a shall. So here are the factors the court may consider when ordering a parent time schedule, any parent time schedule. And we'll just go back and forth. I'll read A, Brian will read B, and if either one of us want to comment on it, we'll do that. So we're on page 1. Okay. So right there, a court may consider A, whether parent time, I think it's funny they call it parent time. They're also trying to not make it look like joint equal physical custody. Because remember, in Utah, the law is if you have more than 110 overnights, you're a joint physical custodian. You don't have to be 50-50. But they don't want to call it joint custody. They want to call it equal parent time.
Right.
Parent time is what they used to call visitation.
Right. And everybody hated visitation,
Yeah.
which rightly so, because you
it
don't
may-
want to be called a
no,
visitor.
Yeah, I'm not a visitor, I'm a parent.
I'm not visiting my kid.
But now they're calling it parent time. So everybody knows parent time is like, well, you're not really a parent. You're just getting parent time.
Right.
You're not custodial.
Right.
I don't know why they do that. They should have just called it, look, if it's 50-50, it's 50-50 custody, not 50-50
And I
parent.
hate the idea that one parent has to be designated as the custodian, one has to be the non-custodian.
Which is what we're going to talk about here, because this
Right.
is weird. Okay, so anyway, whether parent time would endanger the child's physical health or mental health or significantly impair the child's emotional development. Nobody can argue with that.
Okay.
If somehow 50-50 custody or even minimal custody would somehow harm a child, then that parent shouldn't be having that kind of contact.
Sure.
9 out of 10 parents, never going to be a problem, and yet
Right.
they still have to fight.
B, evidence of domestic violence, neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, or emotional abuse involving the child, a parent, or a household member of the parent.
Any problem there? It's going a little too far. Obviously,
mean, the household member thing.
Obviously, if you're physically or sexually abusing a child, that's going to knock you out of contention for.
You got a brother
50-50
that's causing
custody.
problems. He's moving out. He gets in a fight with you. Does that really involve the kids? No, the kids weren't even there. But
And so I think it may be a little too broad, but still, I mean, I can see how getting in a fight with your brother every night is certainly not
Sure,
good for
not
the
good,
kids.
right.
And if you're going to keep living with your brother and the
Sure.
kids are over there 50% of the time, but still, what they'll do is all that does is it opens it up for someone to say, oh, well, he used to live with his brother, or I think I've heard tell that he's going to move in with his brother. And kind of like. C, the distance between the residency. How about residence?
Yeah.
Anyway, the distance between the residency of the child and the non-custodial parent. We could call them the other parent.
Why not? The other parent.
But why do that when you can basically kind of create that subtle
Yeah,
implication?
I'm sorry. What kind of parent are you?
Oh, well,
Are you custodial or non-custodial?
Well, they're telling me right now I don't know what I am, but there's this presumption of non-custodial.
Oh, okay. You're the non-custodial parent.
And if you're the joint custodial parent, you can't be a non-custodial parent. All right, D.
A credible allegation of child abuse has been made.
Okay, we laughed at this.
Credible.
Okay, what is a credible allegation? That means that you can simply claim child abuse.
It's like victim advocate.
Right. Well, so in other words, not that child abuse was committed,
Right.
but that somebody made
alleged.
a believable claim.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. How about a believable claim that's a lie?
Well, was it credible?
Well, it sounded pretty good.
But it was a lie. But it was a credible.
Well, I didn't know it was a lie. I mean, so I don't know where.
So it's not fact.
Yeah. So what they're
It's an
saying.
allegation.
So what this means is, hey, look, I can't prove that the other parent's abusing our child or children, but you'll have to trust me. It's happening.
It's a credible allegation.
And just because I can't prove it, is that really why we shouldn't deny the? It's like, yes. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
A credible allegation. Now, we will be the first to admit there are ways to abuse children that leave no trace.
Sure.
And it really becomes a matter of your word against mine. What gets me is that if we've already seen this. Men come to court saying, my wife or girlfriend abuses me, and they get laughed out of court. A woman comes to court without a mark on her and says, I'm abused.
I'm scared.
Physically.
I'm scared.
Physically abused, or I'm threatened.
Yeah.
And the guy comes in and says, I deny all of it. There's not a scintilla of evidence to back this up. Like, well, but look at how shaky she is and look at those tears. That's credible. Nobody would fake that. Give me a friggin' break.
7 out of 10.
Yeah, it can happen. It can happen. So I'm not really sure a credible allegation. By the way, who determines what's credible? The judge. Does the judge have to explain why it's credible? No. All they have to do is say, I find it credible.
Judge or commissioner. Right.
Well, the judge is the ultimate one who makes the decision. E, the lack of demonstrated parenting skills without safeguards to ensure the child's well-being during parent time. Okay, a lack of demonstrated parenting skills. Let me tell you something right now. I have never, in 24 years of practice, had either parent come to court to demonstrate their parenting skills. There simply isn't time to do that. Or if there is time to do it, nobody's ever taken the time to engage in such a stupid exercise.
And how would you? Like, let's see how fast you can cook mac and cheese.
Right.
You failed out of here.
You'd literally have to bring in a hot plate and a pan and some water and the ingredients, and you'd have to demonstrate that you can cook. You'd have to
change a diaper in under 5.
You'd have to change a diaper on the child or a doll to show you can change a diaper. You'd have to show that you know CPR, I guess. You'd have to show that you can that you have at least a high school level education to help children. I mean, demonstrated parenting skills? A lack of nobody ever demonstrates parenting skills in a divorce case.
Now the government is going to judge your parental skills.
Yeah, even when there's a custody evaluation, I have never seen a custody evaluator say, okay, now make dinner, give a child a bath, administer cough syrup. No, and here's the other thing. If you're going to bring up that somebody is that incompetent as a parent, then that should be you as the other parent saying, I'm divorcing, and the reason I'm divorcing is because my spouse is an incompetent, dangerous parent who can't even boil water, doesn't even know how many pills to give the child, something like that. It almost never comes up. Very few people divorce because of unfit parenting.
Right.
Abusive, sure. Maybe they might be beating the kids, but then you just say, he beats the kids, and look, there's a black eye. There's stitches. There's a bruise. You can point to it, but demonstrated parenting skills. So here's what that really comes down to in real world experience. What it'll be is the let's dupe the judge contest, where someone will come in and say, he can't cook. Remember, the idea that a woman can't cook is still culturally biased. Mm-hmm. We all know what woman's work is. Women can cook. Women are born nurturers. They can take care of kids.
If somebody says that to negatively talk about women, everybody's angry. But if it works in their favor...
It works in their favor, they're more than happy to say, look, I'm a woman, I'm a born nurturer. Now, do all women do that? No. But in child custody cases, comes up all the time. So we've seen it. We've seen it where somebody comes in and says, well, I'm a stay-at-home mom. Need I say more? And that's all they say. And the court will well, a stay-at-home mom, that means that the mom cooks and cleans and attends to the children's every need. And I've even said, what if you were a mom in a coma and you were at home? You're a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
You got kids, but you're in a coma. But you wouldn't be able to do any of those things. And the judge is that's a ridiculous example. It's just as ridiculous as saying that because I'm a stay-at-home mom, somehow I must be doing all these things.
That's the magical door of all custody.
Then the next thing I've said, what if mom is perfectly able to do this, not in a coma, and then just is a lazy slob, and so basically does barely enough to keep the kids from just going outside and playing with, fire and bags of glass, shards, and dad comes home and does everything. He not only has a full-time job, but he comes home and he cooks, cleans, and does everything else because mom's a lazy slob. Again, unthinkable to most courts. And of course, mom's going to deny it if she is the lazy slob.
Right.
So demonstrated lack of demonstrated parenting skills. I don't know how you'd ever prove that, and no court's going to have the patience to have people come in and put on a cooking exhibition, a child bathing and dressing exhibition,
right.
administration of treatments and medicine. It's just ridiculous.
I can see multiple children. Go ahead. Whose pants are these?
Yeah.
Timmy's or?
Yeah. You failed. Yeah.
Fail. Yeah.
All right. F,
the financial inability of the non-custodial parent.
There we go again. Non-custodial parent.
To provide adequate food and shelter for the child during periods of parent time. So even when you have the parent time, are you doing it properly?
Or do you have so little
properly?
money? Are you so poor that you can't provide adequate food and shelter? Okay. What I find interesting is that they're saying, so if you're too poor, that could be a strike against you. Unless you happen to be too poor, at which point it actually works in your favor, and we'll talk about that in a moment.
It's both sides.
Yeah, in a joint custody situation, actually being the poorer of the two gives you more custody.
Yeah.
But if you're poor, that actually is a strike against you up here. Inconsistent, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. All right, G, the preference of the child, if the court determines the child is of sufficient maturity. Here's the thing. The courts will never talk to children. Now, they'll say they will.
So when is a child able to talk to the courts?
When they've shown sufficient maturity.
You mean when the child isn't a child?
Yeah.
Clever.
Okay, so the courts will tell you that they'll speak to children, but then they'll tell you that that's bad and harmful and traumatic, none of which is true, as a general matter. And then they'll say, we know what we need to do. Can't have the judge talk to the kids directly, from the child's mouth to the judge's ear. No.
But we need a third party.
We need a third party to do that. Someone who doesn't record the interviews with the kids.
Right.
And just tells you what
Privacy.
happened. Yeah, tells you what happens if it happened at all. How do we know that the third party is lying or not?
Can't.
We don't.
Tell.
Could we know if we just recorded the interview? Yes. Would that traumatize a child? No. Especially if you told children this is just
might
standard.
put them in the middle.
This is this could put him in the middle, as if having them interviewed doesn't put them in the middle.
That was devil's advocacy.
So what they'll do is they'll say the child's preference, but how do we know the child's preference? The child literally almost never, and when I say almost never, I mean virtually never, gets to actually tell the judge who makes the child custody decision. Instead, they make the child speak to a third party who then comes to court, doesn't have an interview recording, and just says, I spoke to the child, we don't know if you did or not. I asked these questions, we don't know if you did or not, and the child answered this way, and we don't know whether the child did or not.
No way to tell, yeah.
And then says, and I recommend...
We can't even bounce it off of what the kid is telling us.
We can't even say if the kid... Yeah. Then we say, and based on that, I'm the third party, and then I recommend that you grant joint custody or equal custody or minimum custody.
And we're not trying to bag on that third party person that might actually have some skill.
No,
I'm not.
No, I am.
But
because it's not their fault.
Right.
And even if they do a really good job, the problem is we don't know if they did a good job because there's no record.
Right. That's the whole idea.
And the thing is that no matter how good a job you've done.
You could be skilled, you could be totally not skilled. We'd never know. That's what I'm saying.
And no matter how good a job you've done, it still doesn't mean we shouldn't have the judge talk to the kids. It just doesn't. The idea, and then the judges will say either.
And if judges are scary because of the big black robes, take them off. Wear normal clothes.
Take your robe off. Meet. But here's the thing: if the judges say I'm not qualified, well then you need to quit as a judge. You are qualified. The statute says you can interview the kids. If you don't feel qualified, even though the statute says you are, well then go get GAL training. Go read a book about how to interview children.
Guardian ad litem.
Yeah, go to the Guardian ad litem's office in the state of Utah. Will educate judges free of charge and give them free Guardian ad litem training. What will happen is that the judge can get the training, and then that way the judge can learn how to do exactly what the guardian ad litem they appointed did. Okay, or you can get a custody evaluator who is the same thing. I'm going to tell you I did certain things. There's no way of knowing if I actually did it. I'm going to tell you what questions I ask without knowing what questions I ask, if I ask them at all. I'm going to tell you what the kids said, even though there's no record of that, and we don't know if the kids actually said these things or said more or said less or said something different. So the preference of the child is going to be discovered in probably the most inefficient and unreliable way that you could choose, maybe short of a Ouija board. All right. The incarceration of the, there we go, non-custodial parent, not the other parent, the non-custodial parent. Gee, I wonder if that implies that there's going to be a non-custodial arrangement.
Sure, like that word.
I mean, it certainly doesn't imply there's going to be an equal or joint, right?
Right.
Okay, non-custodial parent in the county jail, secure youth corrections facility, or an adult corrections facility. All right. If you've been locked up for, if you've been locked up for having a lot of unpaid parking tickets, probably doesn't matter. If you're locked up because you're beating people up or dealing drugs, maybe a different problem. So I don't think we have a problem with that. Okay,
shared interests between the child and the non-custodial parent. So if I'm the non-custodial parent and
you
my
mean the
kids,
other parent?
Yeah,
Okay.
the other parent. And my kids don't like stuff I like, I shouldn't have time with them.
Now, how many of you growing up had a dad or mom who didn't share your interests and still loved you with all of his or her heart? How many of you had a dad or mom
speak on
who
this a
didn't
little.
share your interests and who you still got along with? And granted, you may have felt a little sad when, if dad was a rough and tumble, grease monkey kind of guy whose idea of a good time is working on his Ford Fairlane on the weekends, when you wanted to dance and sing and all that kind of stuff. But did dad still come to your recital?
Sure.
Did he like it?
Yeah.
No.
But he
He
still
was
went.
bored,
Yeah.
but he supported you, and you were glad he was there.
Yeah.
Did dad come up and say,
Nice pirouette.
I don't know how good a job that was, but I'm sure proud of you.
Knock him down.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you could have a dad or mom that does that. So shared interests.
My dad
It just
loves
seemed-
to train and ride horses.
Okay.
I have really bad hay fever. And we couldn't share that same bond, although I did like riding horses. But this is before there was medicine that was readily available to help you with hay fever.
So you didn't have a shared interest.
So I couldn't. There was no way. I was physically.
But what I'm saying is, shared interest is nice, but is it really a make or break factor?
Absolutely
not.
I still wanted my dad
Absolutely
around.
not.
Yeah.
My dad is not really interested in the things I do as a lawyer. In fact, my dad does not like lawyers. He loves me. He thinks I made a mistake becoming a lawyer, but he doesn't hold it against me. Does my dad love me?
Yeah.
No. Is my dad proud of me for going to college and graduating from a doctoral program and doing good works and stuff like that? Yes.
Yeah.
Do my dad and I need to have a shared interest in divorce and family law to get along?
No.
No. Do children need to have shared interests? No. Is it nice?
Yeah.
Necessary?
No.
Not just no. Hell no.
Right.
All right. The involvement or lack of involvement of the non-custodial parent in the school, community, religious, or other related activities of the child. You made some interesting points about that.
This is the one that I marked down because I thought it was strange that that literally could be a determination of whether you're fit to be around your kids or to have your kids around you, is if you, let's say you changed your religion in the middle of your divorce or after or post-divorce, whatever.
Yeah, you lost your faith.
Or let's just say even if you changed faith.
That's what I mean. You lost the faith that you had in common.
Sure.
And either became an atheist or just changed religion.
Yeah, or became inactive. I mean, that shouldn't, as long as you're still a good parent, have anything to do with whether you're a good parent.
Now, why is that? Because once you start to make religious compatibility an issue, what you've done is you're either going to have to, as a judge, you're going to have to determine that having a religion is superior to no religion.
Right.
Or that no religion is superior to a religion.
Or that once you have one, you're locked into it.
Yeah, and that
can't
change.
escape.
Yeah. So what you're doing is you've now determined you're now making a religious test.
Yeah.
So again, nobody was going to argue that religious compatibility is better than religious incompatibility, as long as your religion isn't that you're bigoted or you're violent or you're crazy and you believe that all you need is sunlight to live on or something like that, because that's what your religion teaches. But to say that somebody who has lost his faith or her faith, changed faiths, or just, like you say, he's not active in that person's faith anymore, somehow that's a strike against him or her. Well, you're going to get some secular judges as well that are going to say, well, it's about time. I'm glad so-and-so isn't religious. Religion's for suckers. Religion's for fools. And then you say, well, wait a minute.
Or the opposite, one that's real staunch. And
that's what I'm saying. Either way.
Yeah, these heathens.
Yeah, it's like you don't
I'm
have
going to award custody to this person because...
because this person's a good churchgoer.
Right.
You can be a good parent and not be religious. Right. You can be a good parent and be religious. Right. And when you start to favor religion or no religion, simply because of its of religion, not because it's helping or hurting a child.
Not because of the value of the religion or the value of not having a religion.
So, I mean, sure, go ahead and consider certain compatibility things like religious compatibility and other things, but it's just a tricky thing. I don't know why that's been put in there. K, the availability of the non-custodial parent
to care for the child when the custodial parent is unavailable to do so because of work or other circumstances.
So what they've suggested here is that, well, there may be a custodial parent with a job, which kind of sounds like the non-custodial parent, who was made in part the non-custodial parent because of the job. Because of the job.
But if they're the custodial, then it's okay.
It's okay to have a job. I mean, all they're doing is they're just trying to support their children financially.
Right.
Kind of like the other guy that got marginalized as the non-custodial parent.
No, because he's the non-custodial.
Well, he went to work just to get away from us. Well, you're going to work to get away from your... No.
Star belly, non-star belly.
I'm pulled away from the kids. It's not okay. So you get the hypocrisy involved in that. All right. L. A substantial and chronic pattern of missing, canceling, or denying regularly scheduled parent time. There is no regularly scheduled parent time until a lawsuit is filed.
Right.
So if you had to try to make sense of this, what you could say is, while we're together, whether married or unmarried, you didn't have regularly scheduled parent time unless maybe you were unmarried and living apart, or I guess married too and separated for a long time. That you could prove the existence of a, what would you call it? You'd call it, excuse me just a moment, you'd have the existence of a schedule. So maybe there was something written down on a Google Calendar, maybe some exchanges of emails or text messages showing there was a schedule and that somebody kept dropping the ball and not doing it. Sure. Right. If you're making an agreement to share custody.
Or we have family movie night every Thursday, and darn it, you go to your dumb job that pays for everything on Thursday.
Yeah, or you're out.
So you've missed a bunch.
So, I mean, but that's not parent time.
Yeah.
So that's kind of something that you would use to modify a child custody or parent time schedule. I'm not so sure it would be a good factor in determining, because you don't have a parent time or custody schedule when you file for divorce or when you file a child custody dispute. Okay, M.
Okay, M is the minimal duration of and lack of significant bonding in the parent's relationship before the conception of the child.
So this one has us scratching our heads. This is what we think this means. So again, read it again slowly.
The minimal duration of and lack of significant bonding in the parent's relationship before the conception of the child.
Okay, so translated into normal parlance, that means one night stand at the very least.
Sure.
So you've got a man and a woman who have sex, and that's I'm sure that's minimal duration of a relationship.
Okay.
Especially as parents, that's about as minimal as it gets.
Significant bonding.
Yeah,
okay.
That's, I mean, almost no bonding at all.
Okay.
How does that have anything to do with one's fitness as a parent?
Well, nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So what we're really doing is saying is if you have a one-night stand, well, that's not good.
Let's say a child is born out of a one-night stand.
One-night stand.
You still love the kid. You still want to take care of the kid.
Maybe you don't. Well, here's what I'm saying. You can't.
But
don't fall into this. Don't fall into this trap.
Right.
So, a man and a woman have a one-night stand. Everybody knew what they were doing.
Okay.
Neither one of them maybe wanted to get pregnant, or maybe it's that hard. All I want. Okay. Maybe a woman decides to have a one-night stand so she can get pregnant, but the guy doesn't know that. Okay. So, how does that mean that the man in this case is a bad parent?
It doesn't. I mean, they both had a one-night stand. They both
knew the risks.
Sure.
And whether you're married or not,
right,
you can have sexual intercourse that results in a pregnancy.
Sure.
That doesn't mean that, oh, well, that child wasn't planned.
You can still say,
that pregnancy wasn't planned, so we love that child less.
No. No. I mean, how many pregnancies are planned?
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so here's the situation. I don't see why the bonding between parents really has anything to do with the bonding between a parent and child. The mother who gets pregnant from a one-night stand may love that child, hate that child, or be indifferent to that child.
Same as the dad.
The man who impregnates the mother either loves that child, hates that child, or is indifferent to that child. But the bond between the parents doesn't really... Now, if what they're trying to suggest is, well, if the parents can't get along, we don't want them interacting a lot, sharing custody. The fact of the matter is that even when you have a minimum custody schedule, you're going to interact with that other parent a ton.
Yeah.
You're going to interact with that parent at least once a week and every other weekend, at the very least. So,
even as your kids become older, you still have to interact some, but you don't have to have, like, for example, I'm divorced. I don't have to have some great bond with my ex to care about my kid.
Nor do you have to spend a great deal of time interacting with your ex. You drive the child to mom's house, child goes into mom's house, mom brings the child back and walks.
We do the
house.
opposite, actually. I do the pickup, they do the pickup.
But the point is...
Exactly.
Yeah. So, the bonding between the parents, it's just not a factor.
Right.
I challenge anyone to show me how that's a significant factor.
In fact, that's kind of why they end up being your ex.
The parent time schedule of siblings. Okay, so let's assume that this is a more than one relationship. You have more than one child with more than one person.
Okay.
You've had multiple children in multiple marriages. So it may be that your kids that you have in your previous relationship are on one schedule.
Okay.
And now you want to be on a different schedule with this other set of kids or child.
Okay.
Yeah, that could be a problem.
Okay.
That could be a problem.
Sure.
You might have a very difficult time juggling both schedules.
But to me, it sounds like nitpicking a blended family. A little bit.
It is.
Yes.
But it's not picking on a blended family. It's just simply recognizing, hey, blended family, if you can make this work, more power to you. Right. If you can't, don't crab about the fact that your schedules are making this difficult to award 50-50. Sure. All right. The lack of reasonable alternatives to the needs of a nursing child. Once again, this presumes, because I happen to know a little bit about those who worked on the drafts, that if you want 50-50, you don't want a child to nurse. You SOB.
Right.
Of course you want the child to nurse. Of course you want this infant to have to feed when it needs to feed. And that's going to be every couple of hours.
Sure.
In some cases. That's going to make 50-50 difficult, if not impossible.
At the start.
Hey,
sure.
I've got an idea. Let's wait until the child is weaned. And
no
then
longer needing to breastfeed?
And then we'll go to a 50-50 schedule.
Brilliant.
But until that time, we will accommodate the nursing schedule. But that doesn't mean that we will treat a 12-year-old child
like a
12-month child. We're not going to determine the entire schedule for the child's remaining 17 years based upon what schedule we had in place when the child was nursing. Duh.
Yeah.
You think that doesn't come up? It comes up all the time. There are literally courts that will say, I'm going to make one and one only custody and parent time award that will govern for the rest of this child's life, regardless of how the child feels when he or she is 12, 13, 14, 15, and may want to spend
16,
more time.
17, 18, yeah. Well, 18, they finally can.
All right. Next, that would be P.
Yeah, P. Any other criteria the court determines relevant to the best interests of the child.
Nobody can argue with that, as long as it's a decent consideration. Okay. So, now, this is, a court may not order a parent time schedule unless the court determines by a preponderance of evidence that the parent time schedule is in the child's best interest. Okay. It says you can't do it unless the court determines. If you are one of these parents who will be operating under this new statute, when the court makes a determination, demand commendably detailed written determinations. Because a court can simply say, I find it best to do this. I think this is in the child's best interest, and that could suffice. And you say, well, wait a minute. What factors did you consider? I didn't say. I may consider these, but I don't have to consider these. So make sure you tell the court, because if you don't ask for them, the court may or may not give them to you. And if you demand them, the court doesn't have to give in to your demands. However, If you point out, it's like, so you're making this determination and you won't tell us how you reached that determination. How am I supposed to determine whether your decision is appealable or not, Your Honor, when you won't bother to share with us what factors, what facts, what evidence
came to this conclusion.
that led you to this conclusion? So keep that in mind. All right. Now, we will end here and then talk about 30-3-35.2, which is also now going to be law after SB 122 is passed, and that will be part 2 of our video. So you can just move on to the next video from here, or you can just stop here. But we would think that if you're somebody who's looking for joint equal custody, you're going to want to hear about it.
Did you want to cover 85, 86, 87?
Yep, we're going to talk about 30-3-35.2 in our second video.
Okay.
Okay, now at this point, we're going to make another.
Yeah, wait for a sec. All right.
This is part 2 of our video on Senate Bill 122, which basically creates a new joint equal parent time, which really means joint equal custody, schedule that up until now was something that was very hard to get, especially if you were a father. But it also made it hard for some women, too. So this is the thing that most people who have been trying to overcome that prejudice and that bias against fathers seeking joint equal custody, this is what people are most interested in. All right. This is what it says, and we will go through it line by line with Brian and I alternating on what that is. Number 1, a court may order the equal parent time schedule described in this section, i.e. section 30-3-35.2, if the court determines that. This is part 2 of our video on Senate Bill 122, which has been passed today, March 5th, 2021, Friday, March 5th. As part of the Utah legislative session for 2021. Now, this is what's so important about Senate Bill 122 is that it makes it easier for parents who are seeking joint equal physical custody to get it. Doesn't guarantee it, doesn't presume that the award should be 50-50. That's what people that originally drafted Senate Bill 122 with the first couple of drafts were trying to get. That didn't happen. But in the 4th substitute bill that did pass today, passed on the House floor today, it makes it easier because it recognizes that it can happen and that if you meet certain requirements, there's no reason why it shouldn't happen. Okay, so what Brian and I are going to do is we're going to tell you, first of all, the statute that has a newly passed statute is 30-3-35.2. So Utah Code section 30-3-35.2 called the Equal Parent Time Schedule. That's what it's called. Now, what's funny is that this is not just a parent time schedule. This actually would result, if it's granted, in a joint equal physical custody award. Why they won't call it that, I don't know. Actually, I think I do know, and that is there's a lot of reluctance to recognize joint physical custodians. And there's even more reluctance to recognize joint equal physical custodians. So, another question that comes up is, hey, now that there's a statute that makes it easier to get 50-50 custody, I've got a decree that's 6 months, 1, 2, 3 years old in my divorce or my parentage case. Does that mean that I can now go back into court and say, look, there's now a new statute that makes it easier? If this statute had existed 2 years ago, I might have gotten joint custody, whereas I don't have it now. Can I go back into court and say, because of a new statute, I want the court to re-examine the award?
Nope.
Why not?
It would literally have to say you can use this new statute as
the basis for your
for modification.
Otherwise, you're still held to the same standard for modifying a custody or parent time award, and that is a material and substantial change in circumstances justifying the change. And the passage of a statute, unless it says this alone can constitute a material and substantial change or a basis for modifying, that's not enough. So I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. If you thought, ooh, now there's a new statute that makes it easier, now I can go back into court. You can't. I get that question a lot. They said, if this passes, does that mean I can go back into court? No, you still have to show a material and substantial change in circumstances. Now, with that said, if there has been a material and substantial change in circumstances, which usually means that there's been a change for the worse in the other parent's circumstances. So let's assume that you have minimal parent time, and so you're a non-custodial parent, but the other parent with custody has been convicted of a violent offense, has become an alcoholic, or finally been caught as an alcoholic or substance abuser, abuses or neglects the children, or something like that. You could say, all right, that is a material and substantial change in circumstances. And because this law makes it easier to get joint equal custody, I want the court to consider awarding me joint equal custody, whereas before it was harder to do. Still could have done it, but this makes it harder for courts, which have generally historically been loath to award joint equal custody, makes it harder to turn you down. So we're going to go through this, and we're going to talk about what this new statute will do for people who are in a case that has not been adjudicated yet, or who will be in such a case in the future. Brian and I will read every other section and subsection. 1A. A court may order the equal parent time schedule described in this section if the court determines that Romanet 1.
The equal parent time schedule is in the child's best interest.
Okay, no problem there. Number 2, each parent has been actively involved in the child's life. It's only fair. I mean, if you're not involved in your kid's life, why should you have your kids on an equal time basis if you haven't been taking care of them as best you could?
All right, and Romanet 3, each parent can effectively facilitate the equal parent time schedule.
Okay, a bit of a problem there with that, because if you've got someone that could follow an equal parent time schedule but wants to sabotage it, then you could say, well, Your Honor, the only reason this won't work is because the other parent won't let it work, sabotaging the plan. So if anything, you should say that means if this parent won't get along with the 50-50 schedule, won't get on board with it, then award custody, primary custody at the very least, to me, because I'm not the problem. Well, you'd be amazed. It used to be, you're not going to believe this, but it used to be the law was a court couldn't award joint custody, which isn't even equal. Couldn't award joint physical custody unless both parents agreed. So all it took was one parent to say, nope, I don't agree.
I disagree.
And the court would go, oh, my hands are tied. Shockingly, they took that out of the code, and courts became magically able to award joint or equal custody. And get this, Brian, the people that didn't want it realized if I don't cooperate and follow the court's orders, I could go to jail. So
Or lose full custody.
Or lose what I've got.
Yeah.
And so, what's interesting about this is the idea that, well, we couldn't possibly award joint custody if both parents aren't on board. Sure you can. And if somebody still flouts the court's orders, you can punish them bad enough where it's like either I'm taking away all of your custody or parent time, or I'm putting you in jail and fining you. So, all right. Next.
B, I believe it was.
Yes.
Okay. So Romanet 3B to determine...
No. 1B.
1B. Okay. We didn't read that, though.
To determine whether each parent has been actively involved in the child's life, the court shall consider, 1, Romanet 1, each parent's demonstrated responsibility in caring for the child. Now, again, sounds good on the surface. Here's the problem. What does demonstrated responsibility in caring for the child mean? The drafting of this statute is very vague and ambiguous, and I don't know why it was. So we could think it means certain things, but courts could interpret it many different ways. How would you define demonstrated responsibility in caring for the child? We can think of some fairly obvious things.
Sure. Can you feed the child? Can you clothe the child?
Can you keep the child from running out in the middle of the road?
Right.
Are you not abusing the child? Are you not neglecting the child?
Do you know not to put the child in the oven? Do you know?
Yeah. Do you not live in a cardboard box?
Right.
A few things like that. This thing, demonstrated responsibility, that could mean anything and thus means nothing. So, again, you could try to come up with some standards, but why not just simply articulate what those standards are rather than giving us some nebulous, ambiguous thing like this? Sub 2, each parent's involvement in child care. Not the best definition, but I think we can understand what that means. Like,
sure.
Does each parent know how to and actually provide adequate care for the child?
Right.
Oh, what kind of care? Could that mean that you have a job and you provide financial support? The only one who provides financial?
Yes.
No. No, some courts say, look, that's not what child care means. Only because they've chosen to define that as, and then other courts would say, well, of course child care means providing for the children. If you're putting a roof over the child's head, that's certainly caring for the child.
It's got to be done.
Now, there's different kinds of child care. There's changing poopy diapers. That's child care. Yeah. No one can deny that. But it's not the only kind of child care. But a lot of courts, who are men and women judges, will say, well, we all know that child care means the menial tasks, the thankless jobs of parenthood. It's like, that a stay-at-home parent takes care of. Sounds like a mom, right? And so when dad says, look, I understand, I don't change as many diapers. I change them. I don't give as many baths. I give baths. I don't cook as many meals. I don't do any laundry. Am I a bad parent? No. And now that we're splitting up, I can do laundry. I can change more diapers. The only reason I wasn't doing as much was because I was at work providing the only financial support for the entire family. You can't say I was doing that to avoid changing diapers, for crying out loud.
Right. Sometimes
happens.
it's done because one person can do it and the other person can't. Like,
That's exactly what
changing
happens.
oil in a car. It doesn't mean that somebody that can't change oil in the car is therefore not providing for the children.
Sub 3.
Sub 3, each parent's presence or volunteer efforts in the child's school and at extracurricular activities.
Again, that sounds nice, right? Hey, you don't deserve to be equally awarded custody if you haven't shown that you're regularly involved as a volunteer at the school and the child's extracurricular activities. Nonsense. Nonsense. First of all, if you're the only parent that has the job financially supporting the family, you are likely not going to go to a lot of school plays that take place at 11 a.m.
And on the flip side, you could be the PTA president and still be a horrible, horrible parent.
And still be,
person.
yes,
Yeah.
right. So again, this is interesting. This is one of those things that Brian and I talked about. This is a subtle suggestion that, hey, look, we know which parents, typically, especially in Utah, volunteer at the schools.
Yeah.
It's moms. So that means that if you're a mom, you're going to have
Basically like saying,
you're going to have an advantage here. Now wait, there is nothing wrong with volunteering at school.
no.
But is it necessary to be a good parent? No, it's not. I don't think my dad ever volunteered at my school.
Yeah.
He did come and speak on career day about what he did for a living. Okay? And guess what? My mom was sometimes involved a lot in what happened at school and sometimes wasn't. Does that make my mom bad? Do we take an average? It's like, well, she wasn't as involved as she should have been during middle school. So it's like, okay, the idea that you have to volunteer at school to be a good parent is nonsense. The idea that you have to be heavily involved in children's extracurricular activities is nonsense. I took a calligraphy class in middle school. My mom and dad could do nothing to help out with that. It was an extracurricular activity. And of course, I finished the class just when they invented laser printing, which made my calligraphy completely useless. My mom and dad didn't discourage me from taking the class, but they didn't come and pat me on the back, and they didn't come to my calligraphy class graduation ceremony and take photographs with me. And I wasn't the least bit upset about it at all. And you know what? Another example. I ran track in high school. Track and field, the most boring spectator sport. I mean, I thought soccer was hard to watch, but my gosh. Oh, by the way, for those of you who think that soccer is one of those goofy American terms, you don't know your history. But anyway, track and field is really boring to watch because it's really exciting when you watch the 100-meter dash. But it takes like 2 hours working up to that before you finally see a race. Right. So my parents were like, hey, do you want us to come to your track and field meet? And I said, no. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. I mean, I'm grateful you want to support me, but you've seen a few things, come to regionals, come to something where, there's something at stake, and when you're seeing really good people. But, like some school against school meet, that's a lot of waiting around and not a whole lot to do and not a lot of action. Again, so, by the way, what about being supported by paying the fees and you don't show up?
Well,
is that all it is? Is that money? Do you think money solves it?
No.
So, yes, extracurricular activities, certainly not a bad thing. Volunteering at school, certainly not a bad thing. Key factor in determining whether you're worthy to be a joint equal custodian, not even close.
Well, what about number 4?
Each parent's assistance with the child's homework. Okay. Probably pretty good. If you're going to be a 50-50 custodian, you're going to need to be helping with homework because you're going to have the child half the school year. And that child's going to be coming to your house with homework to do at least some of the time. Okay.
Which could be summarized in one little lesson, though.
Okay.
Here's how to use Google. Done.
Not only that, but how would you ever prove that before you split up as parents, that one parent or the other was or was not helping with homework? How would you ever prove that? You never have to have your parents sign at the bottom of your homework saying, I helped. You do sometimes have to have a parent sign off saying this child completed this task.
Or turn in video evidence that's then watched by someone to check it off.
Yeah, but once again, parents don't have to certify, I'm a caring parent who helps with homework. And if you did have to do that, you could lie through your teeth and sign the document at the bottom saying, I do. So unless the schools suddenly change and require every parent who ever helps to notarize something at the bottom and agree that they helped, even that's not enough, because the child could say, hey, look, Mom, Dad, I really appreciate your willingness to help. I didn't need your help. I'm smarter than both of you combined. However, I don't want either one of you to get dinged in the child custody dispute, so write down that you helped me with my homework when you didn't help. It's hard to prove. You could have a dad who helps, and then Mom could say, well, remember, I'm a stay-at-home mom, so clearly I help with homework more. That's not necessarily true. And number two, just because Mom said it doesn't mean that Mom's telling the truth. And just because Dad said that he does doesn't mean he's lying. So I don't know how you'd ever prove who helps with homework. The only people that know that are Mom,
kids.
Dad, and the kids.
Yeah,
will the court ever listen to the kids? Almost never. We talked in our previous video. The courts are loath to speak to the kids and find out what these factors are like in their lives. Number 5, sub 5.
Sub 5, each parent's involvement in preparation of meals, bath time, and bedtime for the child.
Again, how will you ever prove what somebody claims? You could have a mom who's a lazy slob who says, I do all the meal prep, all the baths, and I put the kids down for bed every night, and she could be lying through her teeth. You'd never be able to prove that one way or the other. Dad could say, Mom's a lazy slob, and I do all the meal prep, bath time, and bedtime, and he could be lying through his teeth or be telling the truth. You'd never be able to tell. I don't know. And here's what's happening. Here's what's funny. I've got a case right now where Dad is saying, Mom's a lazy slob, I do everything, and the court just says, well, I don't believe you. Not because Dad got caught in a lie. Dad has not been caught in a lie. In fact, we've got evidence to suggest that Dad is telling the truth, circumstantial evidence that Dad is telling the truth. He's not believed because he's a dad. And it's unthinkable that Mom would be a lazy slob. And if you're a stay-at-home mom and Dad's the guy with the job and the only financial support of the family, Mom clearly is doing the majority of meals, bath time, and bedtime for the children.
Even if Dad's home every night.
Even though Dad's home every night, apparently we still want to believe that all he wants to do is put his feet up, wear his smoking jacket.
Home in time to do the meals, do the bath time, help with the child's homework.
Well, some meals, right. But instead he wants to put his feet up, wear his smoking jacket, and have his wife bring him a copy of the Times while he sits in front of the fire and smokes his pipe. It's just ridiculous. Okay. Number 6, each parent's bond with the child. No problem with that.
Okay.
If you got to, have an adequate bond with the child, who's going to argue with that? Any other factor the court considers relevant. Okay, fine. Okay, to determine whether each parent can effectively facilitate the equal parent time schedule, the court shall consider 1,
the geographical distance between the residence of each parent and the distance between each residence and the child's school.
Fair enough. As we talked about in our previous video, if Mom and Dad live 85 miles apart, joint physical custody is likely not to work. Now, you shouldn't write it off right off the top. It could work.
Right.
Maybe there are circumstances where it could work, like Mom and Dad share custody on an alternating 2-week basis, and it's online school. Or it's homeschool, so they don't need to worry about being close to school.
Yep.
But that's clearly a fair factor to consider, and we'll never deny that. As some of the biggest advocates of joint custody in the legal profession here in Utah.
Or the child has a license and wants to do the travel and gets rid of... Yeah.
Exactly. We're not... distance matters.
Yes, it does.
Okay, and it can be a factor that will kill joint physical custody, even if all the other factors are in place. All right. Let's see. Number 2, each parent's ability to assist with the child's after-school care. Fair enough. If these children are too young to take care of themselves after school, in the 2 or 3 hours between getting back home from school and Mom or Dad getting home from work, fair enough. Next.
The health of the child and each parent consistent with subsection 30-3-10
Sub 6.
Yeah.
Okay, so in other words, if you're too sick to take care of kids, then obviously joint physical custody is not going to work because you can't do it. That's a shame. That's sad. Maybe it's a non-permanent, temporary kind of thing, where you shouldn't be held against you. It's like, look, right now when I'm getting divorced,
'cause of my surgery,
I'm
right.
recovering from some kind of surgery that's going to take me a year and a half before
Yeah.
I'm back to normal.
Yeah.
You know, or I had my spinal cord severed. I was like, don't take that away from me just because of something that I didn't cause. Okay, but you know, health and ability go hand in hand. All right. The flexibility of each parent's employment or other schedule. I'm not sure that you need to have a flexible schedule. You just have to have a schedule that's conducive to 50-50 custody.
Mm-hmm.
And let's assume that I work 2 weeks
Yeah.
and then I'm off 2 weeks. Hey, I wonder when I might have the kids with me.
When you're not working.
Am I off 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Right. It's like, is that flexible? No.
No.
I mean, it happens to be conducive. So flexibility, as if to say, well, you know what? Work has to give in to caring for kids. No, there's no kids to be cared for if they're starving and
Right.
cold and naked. You've
Right.
got to recognize that it's important to
Much
earn
harder
a
to
living.
care for kids when you can't even care for yourself. Yeah, 'cause
Exactly.
You can't pay for anything.
All right. Well, the next one is this one right here: physical facility. Oh no, sorry. Each parent's history and ability.
To implement a flexible schedule for the child.
I think. Did I just read that one?
No, we were talking about the health.
All right. No. Each parent's ability to provide appropriate playtime with the child.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Appropriate playtime. Okay. If you're getting divorced or you're splitting up because one of you just ignores the children completely, then if you're the kind of person seeking joint custody because you're a jerk, because you're a narcissist, because you want to save money on child support or something like that, but appropriate playtime? I mean, if you're a good parent that prepares meals and baths and has a flexible schedule, who lives in sufficient physical proximity, who has a strong bond and blah, 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 isn't it given that you know how to play with a child? I mean, you're going to do patty cake when they're little. You're going to teach them how to play hi-ho cherry-o when they get a little older. You're going to teach them how to play chess and throw the baseball and football around. You might teach them how to play hockey and ice skate. I mean,
Well, and who determines whether it's appropriate or not?
and what? Yeah.
Patty cakes.
By the way, what if you are the kind of family that doesn't like to engage in a lot of physical recreation? You're not a football, basketball,
Right.
baseball, hockey.
You play board games instead.
Outdoor hiking, shooting, and instead you sit around and you play board games and
Play
you like to
chess.
play the piano.
Sure.
And stuff like, and like to read poetry to each other. Well, you've got a judge who came from, like, it's like, I'm a man's man, and that's all we ever did was play baseball and football and hockey. And any kid who doesn't
Chess
learn,
isn't appropriate.
any kid who doesn't learn how to hit a baseball is someone who's really missing out. Well, then you're saying, well, wait a second. So you don't find what I do to be adequate playtime. How about this? How about a child that just likes to read books? I've got kids right now that getting them to sit down and play a game of chess, and I'm terrible at chess. They'll win every time. It's really hard.
Yeah.
And so I
Tell that to Beth Harmon.
adequate playtime. Okay, next.
Adequate playtime. I'm sorry. I lost
6.
where we
Each
were.
parent's history. I'll just have you do 7.
Okay.
Each parent's history and ability to implement a flexible schedule for the child. A flexible schedule for the child. I didn't realize the children ran the show here in this family. By the way, my parents had no obligation to me to accommodate my schedule. You know what I mean? Now, they had to change my diapers when I was a helpless baby. They had an obligation, a moral and legal obligation to feed me. Now, obviously, if you live in a trailer with one bed and no plumbing facilities and you have 4 kids, you may have inadequate
one-bedroom
physical
apartment.
facilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or a 1-bedroom apartment and 4 kids.
Yeah.
Or you don't have an apartment that will accommodate the special needs of a handicapped child. But what's interesting is that we didn't used to have this provision in the code in the past, and we managed to do just fine. But I'm not going to complain. Adequate physical facilities. Now here's the question. What are those? Because one thing you used to get a lot, and I assume you still will, is dad is the non-custodial parent, and the kids come over rarely because he's the non-custodial parent. Well, it doesn't make sense for dad to have 3 bedrooms in a house that get used less than half the year. So what dad does is he puts some bunk beds in a spare bedroom, and then he sleeps, and then he puts his kids in some of the kids on the bunk beds, some of the kids in his own bed, and he sleeps on the fold-out couch bed in the living room when the kids are there. And we had, moms or dads that would do that, but mostly it was dads. And the moms would complain saying, "This is inadequate. These aren't sufficient physical facilities."
You mean for dad?
For dad. Yeah, exactly. The kids all had their own
Who
beds.
isn't complaining? and is an adult.
Yeah, dad's an adult. Dad's not complaining. Dad's happy to sleep on the on the hide bed when the kids are there. And mom would complain, saying, "Well, it's just I don't like it." It's like, but who's suffering here? Not even dad's complaining.
Right.
The kids certainly aren't suffering, and just you see that all the time. You still will, because it was never really about the facilities. It was about trying to just mess with custody, try to deprive that parent of the time that they had by coming up with any excuse, no matter how lame, for why you should do it. All right.
So the next one,
any other factor.
Any other factor the court considers relevant.
Okay, 2A. If the parties agree to, or the court orders the equal parent time. Now this is crazy. If the parties agree to, or the court orders the equal parent time schedule described in this section, a parenting plan in accordance with sections 30-310.7 through 30-310.10 shall be filed with an order incorporating the equal parent time schedule. Actually, that's not crazy. That was something else I was thinking about. Okay, that makes perfect sense. If you come to an agreement, you come to a plan, got to prepare it, you got to submit it to the court, so the court can know what it is, approve it, and then that will become the order of the court. Here's the part that I didn't like. B, go ahead, Brian.
An order under this section shall result in 182 overnights per year for one parent and 183 overnights per year for the other parent.
Now, at first blush, you might say, well, 365 is an odd number. It can't be evenly divided. Somebody has to end up with 182, and the other person has to end up
but
with...
what does that mean? That's like 49% share of a company and 51, right?
Well, it's not so much that.
Is that custodial?
There is one thing that kind of makes you mad, because you know what the person with the 183rd day is going to say. Well, I've got one day more than you, so I'm
183.
I'm more of a custodial parent than you are. You may be joint, but
listen,
some people,
182.
Yeah, we kind of like to quote Animal Farm. We're both equal, but some of us are more equal than others, if you know what I mean. Now, here's the other thing. It says that one parent shall always have 182 overnights per year, and the other parent will always have 183. Hey, here's a novel idea. How about 183 in odd-numbered years for you and 183 in even-numbered years for me? That means I will be 183 half the time.
Kind of like the holiday thing in the standard.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll be what?
Minimal.
Did you call it the standard?
Standard minimal.
See, even he can't resist.
Standard minimal.
I get 183 half the time.
Minimal.
You get 183 half the time. I get 182 half the time. You get 182 half the time. What's wrong with that?
Kind of like taxes.
The answer is
claiming
nothing.
Right.
Absolutely nothing. Why they say that somebody must be 183 always and 182 always.
It's almost like they're setting you up for, because so-and-so has 183.
And here's why.
So-and-so has
because
182.
later on you're going to find out that when it comes to calculating child support, that one extra day can make a difference of about, in some cases, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 more dollars per month in child support. Not a lot of money. I don't care how poor you are.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of money. But what's weird is,
if you are that poor.
Remember how we talked about that, if your financial ability to take care of kids was a factor in whether you'd get joint custody and joint equal custody? Well, guess what? Now what this bill, which is just a horrible idea, but it's not enough to derail it, and it's still a good thing for parents trying to seek 50-50 custody. But it actually says the parent who makes less money gets awarded the 183 days. Oh, well, isn't that interesting? So being poor actually is a factor that benefits you when determining physical custody, or at least the child support award. So now what you're saying is...
it shouldn't really go either way, should it? Just because you make more money than me doesn't make you a better parent than me.
Or a worse parent.
Or vice versa.
Yeah, and so why should you, being poorer than I am, have more time with the kids, or I less? Yeah. It doesn't make any sense at all. Okay, so this idea that only one of us every year gets 183 and only one of us gets 182 every year it didn't need to happen. And they don't even give the option of alternating 182 and 183 every other year. They should have.
Should say, parties can agree to.
Yeah, but it's too late now. They've already voted on it. But you know what? If you get 50-50 custody and you're the 182 guy with the short end of the stick, you're still better off than you were before.
Way better.
Because they're making this easier. Now,
which we're not to say that it's okay.
Yeah, by the way, are we going to see even more strides to make things even more fair and equitable? Yes. This is one of those things that's going to change. It's inevitable because it's a bad idea. All right. Under the equal parent time schedule, sub C, neither parent is considered to have the child the majority of the time for the purposes of subsection 30-3-10.3 or 10.9, 5C, Romanet 2. So what they're saying is, even though you are the 182 parent, that doesn't mean you're somehow less of a parent or you're being treated as a sub-tier parent. Well, good for them for bringing that up. Okay. E1. Oh, sorry, D.
Yeah, D. Child support for the equal parent time schedule shall be consistent with section 78B-12-208.
So that means that whoever gets the 183rd night gets more money. And if you're poorer than the other parent, you get 183
Which
overnights.
defeats the entire purpose of saying things should be equal when things aren't even
and defeats
equal.
the purpose of being financially responsible. Now, are we suggesting that what if dad makes $6,000 a month,
Right.
and mom makes $5,999 a month? No one's going to say that mom is not pulling her weight.
Can you believe that?
But this is weird. Here's the other thing.
Yeah.
Guess who gets 183 overnights as a result? Mom, for making $1 less. Now, you don't think people would set that up to abuse that? Think again. All right. So let's take a look at E1.
A court shall determine which parent receives 182 overnights and which parent receives 183 overnights for parent.
Again, the court could just simply say, yes, for some reason, if the court could justify it, you should always have 183 and the other parent should have 182. But the court could also say, but see, the way the statute is written, the court doesn't have that power. I would suggest that the court has it anyway. But the court could say, I'm not going to just give one of you 183 always and 182 always. I'm going to say, you get 183 in odd-numbered years, you get 182 in even-numbered years. I would love it if a court would do that and then have somebody appeal it saying, you violated the statute because it says only one of us can have 183 every single day, every single year. I think the Court of Appeals and even the Utah Supreme Court would say, you know what? Yeah, we can see how you read it that way, but we don't interpret it that way. But still, it could have been better drafted. A lot of things in this could have been better drafted, but it's still a step in the right direction, making it easier for people deserving of 50-50 custody to get it, and that's important. E, Romanet 2. For the purpose of calculating child support, the amount of time to be spent with the parent who has the lower gross monthly income is considered 183 overnights, regardless of whether the parent receives 182 overnights or 183 overnights. So I have to correct that a little bit. You could still be the 182 overnight parent, but you'd have child support calculated as if you had 183, as long as you're poorer than the other parent. Wow. Why did we have to even make this part of the mix? Why did you have to complicate this at all and make this a money issue?
To tip the scales.
If this was supposed to make money less of a factor, you couldn't have done a worse job of making it less of a factor.
It almost seems like it was intended to tip the scales.
All right. 3A, line 118.
3A, unless the parents agree otherwise and subject to a holiday, the equal parent time schedule is as follows.
Right. So,
Romanet 1.
So what they're saying here is, unless the parents agree otherwise, this is what the schedule on the holiday schedule will be. This. So get this: the parents either have to agree to a schedule, or the court is forced to impose one schedule alone on them. It doesn't give the court the discretion to impose its own idea.
Yeah.
So it used to be, it could be parents can agree. Court can use the statutory schedule if it wants, or the court can come up with its own schedule. Yeah. Now the court doesn't have the ability to come up with its own schedule. Again, did anyone notice this? Or is there some reason why they did that? I don't know why. Again, I think the court could impose its own schedule, and if anyone tried to say, well, you don't have the power to do that under 30-3-35.2, I think the Court of Appeals and the Utah Supreme Court would say, no, this is
jurisdiction.
We interpret the code. Yeah. What they'll say is, we interpret this really badly drafted statute to mean something that it should have meant all along.
Yeah.
If you think that that's what the courts always do, that's not true. Sometimes the courts will say, wow, we know what they probably meant, but that's not what they wrote.
So we have to follow what they
I think there's enough wiggle room here for the court to say, for the appellate courts to say, if the court imposes a schedule on these folks, the court can do that. Okay, so I'm going to go through the schedule all by myself real quick. One parent shall exercise parent time starting Monday morning and ending Wednesday morning. The other parent shall exercise parent time starting Wednesday morning and ending Friday morning. And each parent shall alternate weeks exercising parent time starting Friday morning and ending Monday morning. Now remember, the parents can come up with their own schedule if this doesn't work for them. But according to this statute, if the parents don't agree, the court has to force this on people, even though there's obviously another schedule that would work just fine. But one of the two parents is trying to sabotage joint custody by saying, nope, it's either my way or the highway. So again, dumb. The child exchange shall take place at the time the child's school begins, or if school is not in session, at 9 a.m. The parents may create a holiday schedule. If the parents are unable to create a holiday schedule, then the court shall order the holiday schedule in section 3335 and designate which parent shall exercise parent time for each holiday described in section 30-3-35. Again, does not give the court the power to come up with its own holiday schedule. I don't know why. Okay. 5A, each year a parent may designate 2 consecutive weeks to exercise uninterrupted parent time during the summer when school is not in session. That's pretty normal, nothing all that unusual there. One parent may make designation at any time, and the other parent may make a designation after May 1. Now, going to school just isn't what it used to be. Now the idea of summer vacation isn't as important as it used to be because we've got people that never set foot in the school buildings.
Virtual.
Homeschooled people or just, pandemic related stuff. That ain't going away. We're not putting that toothpaste back in the tube. We're going to have a lot more flexibility. What if somebody wants to take a child to visit a foreign country in relation to a work trip where that child can still attend school remotely?
Do they have the internet?
Yeah. Well, now the court can't do that.
Yeah.
Because it's either got to be something the parents agree to, and if you're a jerk parent who doesn't want the kids to enjoy this time with mom or dad, you can say, no, sorry, I won't do it. No reason why it can't happen.
Yep.
Or I could make up fake concerns about the safety of the children traveling to Hong Kong or something stupid like that. But instead it's like, well, nope, sorry, the court can't come up with its own schedule. I don't know why. Did they forget that, or is there some reason they left it out? If they left it out, I just can't see why you would muzzle the court that way. The court shall designate which parent may make the earlier designation described above, so which one gets to designate at any time and which one has to do so after May 1st. Again, I guess they could alternate that. The 2 consecutive weeks shall take precedence over holidays, except for Mother's Day and Father's Day. So don't schedule your 2 weeks over Mother's Day or Father's Day if you don't want to get interrupted. Okay, now again, there was another statute, 78B-12-208, that talked about the means of calculating child support when there's a joint equal custody basis, which you can just look up yourself. Again, what's that statute?
78B-12-208,
In the
joint
Utah
physical
Code.
custody obligation calculation.
Bottom line, this is a move that will help parents who deserve joint equal custody to make it easier for them to plead their case. It will make it harder for judges to be biased and prejudiced against parents who are trying to get joint physical custody, where you've got judges that are prejudiced against joint physical custody and or prejudiced against fathers who have a much harder battle ahead of them trying to get custody, 50-50 custody, let alone custody at all. This will make it conceivably harder for the judges to discriminate against fathers. It's still possible, but it's harder to do. And that's a good thing for a lot of deserving fathers. And right now, we know there are fathers watching this with tears in their eyes saying, I'm so grateful that future fathers will not have to suffer my fate, where I got to see my kids who are grown and moved out. I only got to see them every other weekend, 3 hours a week, 3 hours every week, and alternating holidays. They begged and pleaded with me for more time. I could have made it work. I didn't live that far away. They begged and pleaded with mom or dad, and the other parent refused to do it.
We went to court.
Because that person was so malicious and was using my children,
thousands of dollars,
using my children to hurt me or trying to alienate the kids from me. It worked. I don't have a close relationship with my kids. That's what some of these fathers are saying, and they are saying, thank God that this has happened. It doesn't make it a guaranteed thing, but it does make it easier. And for that, we should be grateful to the Utah State Legislature for doing it.